Welcome to NVL Travel Documentary. Every country has its landmarks, towering skylines, bustling streets, postcard views. But the real stories? They often live in the quiet corners, under bridges, behind alleyways, on sidewalks where dreams were lost and sometimes rediscovered. At NVL Travel Documentary, we don't just bring you facts about countries. We tell the stories they try to hide. In this country documentary, we travel to the heart of Cincinnati, not for the views, but for the voices. Voices of those forgotten by a system, people trapped between addiction and survival, between the cold concrete and a second chance. What if the next stop in your travel journey isn't a destination, but a deeper understanding of what it means to be human? This is not your usual travel documentary. This is where empathy meets exploration. Number 1. Cincinnati's visible homeless crisis. If you've walked through downtown Cincinnati recently, early in the morning or late at night, you've likely witnessed it. Figures huddled under overpasses, tents pitched on sidewalks, shopping carts piled high with all of someone's worldly possessions. People sleep curled up under thin blankets, trying to find warmth against the concrete. For many, this has become a daily sight, but for those living it, it's a daily fight. Homelessness in Cincinnati is no longer a hidden crisis. It's out in the open, woven into the city's fabric. It's visible in every park bench occupied by someone trying to rest, in every corner where a makeshift encampment has sprung up. And behind each of those scenes is a complex story of struggle, of survival, and often of a system that failed to catch them before they fell. Overcrowded shelters, when no vacancy means nowhere to go. Organizations like the City Gospel Mission, the Drop-In Center, and Shelter House are doing what they can. They offer hot meals, showers, and temporary beds. But by nightfall, those beds are filled. The line to get inside can stretch down the block, and when capacity is reached, the doors must close, even if the temperature outside is below freezing. Those turned away are left with few options: a bus stop, a doorway, a stretch of sod. The problem isn't lack of effort, it's lack of resources. Cincinnatians' emergency shelter system is overwhelmed, and it's not keeping pace with the growing need. Who are the homeless in Cincinnati? The people living without homes in Cincinnati are not a monolith. They include the working poor, people with jobs who still can't afford rent. The average cost of a one-bedroom apartment in Cincinnati is now between $900 and $1,100 a month. That's more than half the income of someone earning minimum wage. Many live on the edge, one missed paycheck away from eviction. Those battling mental health conditions, disorders like PTSD, schizophrenia, and chronic depression are widespread. Yet proper treatment is rare. Many people have no insurance, no access to affordable medication, and no one to guide them through the healthcare maze. Mental health services are chronically underfunded and often come with long wait times. Individuals struggling with addiction. Cincinnati, like much of Ohio, has been devastated by the opioid epidemic. Fentanyl in particular is cheap and deadly. As of early 2025, Hamilton County reported over 800 overdose deaths in the past year alone. Many of these lives could have been saved with timely intervention and accessible rehab. Veterans, people who once served the country, only to come home and face another battle. Many suffer from physical injuries and invisible wounds like trauma and anxiety. Delays in accessing VA benefits and lack of targeted support often leave them without a lifeline. Weather doesn't wait for policy. Homelessness isn't just a social issue, it's a public health emergency. In winter, temperatures in Cincinnati can drop well below freezing. Without proper insulation, sleeping outdoors becomes a life-threatening risk. Frostbite and hypothermia are not rare. In the summer, sweltering heat brings a different kind of danger: dehydration, heat stroke, and exhaustion. There's little shade, no water fountains, and often no refuge. Extreme weather doesn't care if someone is mentally ill, disabled, elderly, or a child. And yet, people endure these conditions every single day in one of the wealthiest nations on earth. Visible, but ignored. Impossible to pretend homelessness doesn't exist in Cincinnati, but somehow many still try. We become desensitized, accustomed to stepping over the sleeping figures, passing by the tents, avoiding eye contact. But ignoring the problem doesn't make it go away. If anything, it allows it to grow. Homelessness is no longer invisible. It's right there, on our streets, under our bridges, in our parks, and behind every tarp, every bundled figure on a sidewalk is a story, a name, a life. Number 2. The root causes. It's not personal failure. To truly understand homelessness in Cincinnati or anywhere, we need to look beyond the surface. It's easy to assume people just lost their homes or made bad choices. But the truth runs much deeper. Homelessness doesn't begin with a single event. It's the end result of a long chain of systemic failures. It's not about personal weakness, it's about a society that wasn't built to support its most vulnerable. The housing crisis, a system designed to exclude. At the heart of the issue is a simple but brutal reality. There aren't enough affordable places to live. Over the last decade, Cincinnati, like many American cities, has seen a steady disappearance of low-income housing. Developers continue to replace older apartment buildings with high-end condos and luxury units. While these may boost city aesthetics and tax revenues, they leave behind working-class families with nowhere to go. Even so-called affordable housing often isn't truly affordable. For someone earning minimum wage in Ohio, $10.45/hour, rent on a one-bedroom apartment, $900/month, eats up well over half their income. And when people have to choose between rent, food, childcare, or healthcare, the lingering legacy of redlining and racism. This housing gap isn't accidental. It's rooted in a history of discriminatory policies, most notably, redlining. For decades in the 20th century, Black families were denied home loans, blocked from buying in certain neighborhoods, and systematically excluded from wealth-building opportunities. Those policies may be illegal now, but their impact lingers. Today, the Black homeownership rate in the U.S. remains around 40% lower than that of white Americans. In cities like Cincinnati, where historically Black neighborhoods have been gentrified or neglected, the wealth gap continues to grow. Families that were denied the chance to build equity for generations are now being priced out of the very neighborhoods they helped build. Mental health, a broken safety net. Another major driver of homelessness is untreated mental illness. Conditions like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, anxiety, and severe depression are common among unhoused individuals, but access to care is limited. Mental health clinics are overbooked, underfunded, and often not covered by insurance. Even when people want help, they're met with wait lists, complicated systems, or dismissive attitudes. Without stable treatment, they may struggle to hold jobs, maintain relationships, or manage basic daily tasks. Over time, they lose housing, support systems, and the ability to re-enter society, not because they're dangerous or lazy, but because they've been left behind by a system that doesn't make room for them. Addiction, a symptom, not the source. Ohio is ground zero in the nation's opioid crisis. Fentanyl, cheap, deadly, and widely available, has turned addiction into a public health disaster. The cost of one dose? Around $10. The cost of rehab? Thousands. And with limited state-funded treatment centers and long waiting periods, people often can't access help until it's too late. Addiction doesn't exist in a vacuum. It frequently coexists with mental health disorders, trauma, and poverty. And yet, rather than treating substance use as a health issue, the system often responds with punishment, eviction, arrest, job loss. It's a cycle that pushes people further away from recovery and deeper into homelessness. Wages and job insecurity, the working homeless. It's a painful irony. Many people without homes are still working. They deliver your food, clean your hotel rooms, stock your grocery store shelves, but they earn wages too low to cover rent. Ohio's minimum wage of $10.45/hour translates to about $21,000/year, not nearly enough to survive, let alone build stability. Increasingly, people rely on gig work, ride-share driving, food delivery, odd jobs. These may offer flexibility, but they don't come with health care, sick leave, or job security. A single emergency, a car breakdown, illness, or a missed rent payment can spiral into disaster. It's all connected, a vicious cycle. What's most important to understand is that these issues don't operate in isolation. They feed into one another. A lack of affordable housing makes someone vulnerable to eviction. Eviction triggers stress, anxiety, and often depression. Mental illness, when untreated, may lead to job loss or substance use. Addiction then leads to further unemployment and loss of housing. It's a feedback loop, and without intervention, it's nearly impossible to escape. A system, not a flaw. Homelessness is not a personal failure. It's a systemic outcome. It is what happens when affordable housing disappears, when wages stagnate, when healthcare is out of reach, and when centuries of inequality are ignored. If we want real change, we can't just build more shelters. We have to change the conditions that force people into them in the first place. Number 3, community in action. Grassroots Solutions That Work. Homelessness may be one of the toughest challenges facing Cincinnati, but it's also one of the most urgent calls to action, and thankfully, people are responding. While government systems can be slow to adapt, grassroots movements, nonprofits, and everyday citizens are proving that change is not only possible, it's already happening. Across the city, efforts are growing more strategic, more compassionate, and more community-driven. These are not just acts of charity, they're acts of resistance against a system that has failed too many for too long. Breaking down the barrier to homeownership. One of the most powerful ways to break the cycle of homelessness is by helping people achieve permanent housing stability, and that starts with accessible paths to homeownership, especially for marginalized communities who have historically been shut out. Programs geared toward first-time home buyers are stepping up in a big way. These initiatives don't just hand out down payments, they provide financial counseling, credit repair workshops, and real, hands-on guidance through every step of the process. In neighborhoods like Avondale, where gentrification has threatened to displace long-time residents, these programs are helping families plant roots and build generational wealth. One standout example is the Housing Workshop, which pairs housing counselors with individuals for months at a time. They walk people through budget planning, explain loan options, help navigate paperwork, and ensure no one gets left behind. And the results speak volumes. According to the 2024 HUD report, communities that implemented homeownership assistance programs saw a 12% increase in ownership among marginalized groups in just 1 year. veteran-focused support, serving those who served. Veterans are disproportionately affected by homelessness. Many return home carrying the invisible scars of war. PTS log, TS_STM, Ukrainian screenplay, and struggle to adjust to civilian life. Benefits often come with red tape and long delays, and without targeted support, many fall through the cracks. But organizations like Joseph House and the Cincinnati VA are rewriting that narrative. Their approach is holistic: warm beds, hot meals, access to counseling, addiction treatment, and group therapy rooted in military-specific trauma care. Just as importantly, they focus on dignity, reminding veterans they are seen, respected, and valued. Sometimes it's small things that make the biggest difference. A care package on a cold morning, clean socks, a simple conversation. These moments of human connection rebuild the sense of worth that homelessness tries to strip away. And it's working. Between 2023 and 2024, veteran homelessness dropped by 11% nationwide, thanks in large part to community-based efforts like these. Mobile outreach and low-barrier support, meeting people where they are. Not everyone experiencing homelessness is ready to walk into a shelter. Trauma, addiction, mental illness, or fear of the system keeps many isolated. That's why mobile outreach teams have become a game changer. Groups like Shelter House have taken the initiative to go directly into encampments, bringing with them not just blankets and bottled water, but respect and consistency. Their teams include caseworkers, health professionals, and sometimes people who were formerly homeless themselves, people who understand the fear and pride that can make someone say no to help, even when they need it most. They don't force, they don't lecture, they listen, they build trust, and eventually, when someone is ready, they offer a pathway forward: access to IDs, medical care, addiction treatment, housing wait lists, or even a hot shower and a place to rest for a night. These outreach programs are saving lives, literally. Cities that use mobile teams like these have reported a 15% drop in unsheltered homelessness as of early 2025. More than meals, holistic support systems. Food and shelter are essential, but they're only the beginning. What people truly need is a way out, not just a handout. That's where places like Shelter House on Reading Road shine. More than just a soup kitchen or overnight shelter, they're a launch pad for rebuilding lives. They offer resume workshops, job placement assistance, addiction counseling, trauma-informed therapy, and access to long-term supportive housing programs. What makes these spaces work is their philosophy: treat every person as someone worthy of a future. No judgment, no bureaucracy, no condescension, just connection and support. Change happens when communities lead. None of these efforts are silver bullets, but together they form a mosaic of hope, a proof of concept that when people come together, we can chip away at even the most entrenched crises. These are not just services, they're acts of restoration. Every new homeowner, every veteran sheltered, every tent dweller who receives clean clothes and human kindness, they are testaments to what's possible when we stop waiting for change and start creating it ourselves. Because fighting homelessness isn't just about housing, it's about healing. Number 4, building the future, real solutions that make a difference. If we really want to end homelessness, we can't just react. We need to build a future that works for everyone. That means thinking long-term and creating real, lasting change. First up, affordable housing. Let's be honest, we don't need more luxury condos. What we need are homes that everyday people can actually afford. Cities across the country are starting to offer tax incentives to developers who build low-cost housing instead of high-end apartments. In 2024 alone, this strategy helped create over 1 tram namwoy nin affordable housing units nationwide, a big step forward for families who've been priced out for far too long. But a roof isn't enough. People also need wraparound services to stay housed and thrive. Imagine if every neighborhood had a mental health clinic, easy to find, low cost, no judgment. Or if rehab centers didn't just hand out flyers, but had real beds, licensed doctors, and custom treatment plans. That's the kind of care that turns lives around. In fact, Cities with accessible behavioral health centers saw a drop of Muay Chin Fan in homelessness tied to untreated mental illness last year. Then there's job training. Giving people skills, not just handouts, is key. Trade schools that teach practical jobs like HVAC repair, solar panel installation, computer programming, or plumbing are opening doors. These aren't just short-term gigs, they're real careers. In 20 Hai Moi 2, vocational programs helped over Hai Tram Bay Moi Ing people nationwide move from unemployment to stable work. That's not charity, that's empowerment. And finally, we have to talk about property tax reform. Right now, too many low-income families and seniors are losing their homes over unpaid taxes. It's heartbreaking and preventable. By reducing property taxes for vulnerable homeowners, we can help them stay in their homes, stay in their communities, and avoid falling into homelessness. In states that adopted this reform, eviction rates dropped by Ganghai Moifan Tram within the first year. All these ideas are more than just hopeful thinking. They're practical, doable, and already showing results. If we invest in people, not just quick fixes, we build a future where everyone has a chance to belong. Number 5, beyond shelter, the other crack. When we talk about infertility, we also have to talk about the bigger picture, the deeper struggles that many families face every single day. Because it's not just about having a place to sleep, it's about survival, dignity, and a fair shot at life. Let's start with food security. Right now, more than 270,000 families in our region struggle to get enough to eat each year. That's not just a number, that's parents skip meals so their kids can eat. And in many neighborhoods, the problem isn't just money, it's accessible. These are what we call food deserts, areas where there isn't a single grocery store within walking distance. Instead, people are stuck buying overpriced snacks and canned goods from corner stores. No fresh produce, no real nutrition. And things have gotten worse since the federal government cut back on SNAP. That's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as food stamps. Those cuts leave millions of Americans with fewer dollars to spend on meals. And then, there's healthcare and education, two basic needs that still feel out of reach for far too much. Seeing a doctor shouldn't feel impossible, but for many folks, it is. The nearest clinic might be miles away, appointments are expensive, and if your insurance doesn't cover it or you don't have any, you're out of luck. In 2024, nearly 1/5 of adults in low-income areas skipped medical care due to cost or distance. That's not just inconvenient, it's dangerous. Education is another big one. There's a massive gap between what students in wealthier neighborhoods get compared to those in underfunded schools. We're talking fewer resources, outdated textbooks, and overcrowded classrooms. In some districts, high school graduation rates are over 90%. In others, just a few miles away, they barely reached 65. All of this, food, healthcare, education, it's connected. When basic needs aren't met, people are pushed closer to the edge. If we really want to reduce infertility, we have to look beyond the streets and tackle the root causes head on. Because everyone deserves more than just a roof, they deserve a real shot at stability and hope. Number 6, one open door, Maria's story of resilience. For almost Hai Moinam, Maria Thompson lived without a roof over her head. She spent nights under freeway overpasses in San Jose, curled up on sidewalks, moving from place to place with no real sense of safety. Every day was about survival, finding food, staying warm, avoiding danger. And like so many others in her situation, it wasn't because she gave up. It was because the system gave up on her. But then, something shifted. A local nonprofit reached out, not with pity, but with real support. They helped Maria get into a permanent housing program, and soon after, for the first time in nearly Hai Thop, she unlocked the door to her very own apartment. That door changed everything. It wasn't just 4 walls and a roof. It was peace, privacy, and the chance to finally rest. No more looking over her shoulder, no more sleeping on cold pavement, just safety and the dignity she'd been denied for so long. And now, Maria is paying it forward. She brings hot meals to unhoused neighbors. She hands out blankets in winter. She listens, shares her story, and gives hope. Her presence is a quiet reminder that healing is possible. Maria's story shines like a small light in the darkness, a powerful example that homelessness is not the result of someone failing at life. It's the result of a system that fails to protect its most vulnerable. But when we step up, when we invest in real solutions, lives change. Because sometimes, what someone really needs is a door that opens and a second chance waiting on the other side. Homelessness in Cincinnati isn't just something you see, it's something you feel when you walk these streets, hear these stories, and witness lives unfolding in the shadows. It's a reminder that every city, no matter how vibrant or historic, holds unseen battles beneath its surface. But within that struggle, there's also resilience and hope. Real change doesn't start with big promises. It starts with listening, with understanding, and with believing that every person deserves dignity, support, and a safe place to call home. This isn't just Cincinnati's story, it's a human story, one that echoes in cities across the world. If this journey moved you, we invite you to like this video, subscribe to NVO Travel Documentary, and share your thoughts in the comments. Together, let's keep exploring not just the beauty of our cities, but the truths they hold and the futures we can help shape. Thank you for watching.